Hi guys, I hope you saw the countdown. I think we're live on YouTube right now. This is the very first session of our new series, Essentials. And I think a lot of you will be wondering what Essentials is, and don't worry, I'll give you all an introduction. And yeah, we have a lot of interesting things coming up. We have an amazing speaker lined up for today. And I think let's just wait for like a minute or so. We'll start around 2:08:2, and then we can get started with the session. I hope you all are excited. Throw in a hi in the comments if you're here and excited. And yeah, we have like a really cool session lined up. Just be waiting for like 1 minute or so, and I think we can then get started as soon as possible. Yeah. Uh, okay. So, welcome to the very first session of Essentials, guys. A lot of you might be wondering, as I mentioned, what Essentials is, but I am giving an introduction. So, yeah, Essential is a brand new series from us at CodeChef-VIT. It's designed to introduce college students to domains that most people don't really cover, right? It's domains around computer science and development mostly. And we have a lot of things planned. We have amazing guest speaker sessions. We have hands-on sessions from our very own core members. You can expect like cool sessions on trending topics like blockchain, cybersecurity, and for today, a session on cloud concepts. Right, this is something most clubs don't do. I think we're very excited to bring this to you all. Okay, so we have a very interesting speaker lined up for today, and we thank you for like taking the time out like to speak with us today. So let me give you a little brief about who he is. I'm sure most of you already know him because you'll have seen our social media channels. But let me just give you a little brief. Mr. Amit Tuli is an IBM executive and IT architect and an OpenGroup distinguished IT architect. In the past 22 years with IBM, he's worked with IBM software development, research, and client consulting. He works with clients primarily in the Middle East. He's in the UAE right now, and Middle East and Africa. He advises them on transforming their organizations by leveraging cloud platforms and other such technologies. He's very enthusiastic. He was very excited, very enthusiastic to be here today, and he's sharing his experiences, and he's done so before by publishing articles and books as well. And he's also spoken at multiple conferences. Some of his time has been spent in educating clients and colleagues globally on cloud architecture. Without further ado, we welcome Mr. Turi on stage. Hello, sir. We're very glad to have you here.
Aditya, thank you very much. Really excited, and it's an honor to be here, especially this is the first session in your Essential series. So let me start by wishing you all good luck. I think it's an interesting initiative you have taken, and I'm sure it's going to go a long way.
Yeah, I think it'll be very helpful to college students today because like we give them an insight on cloud concepts. I think even before we mention, it'll be good for them because they get an idea of a course right altogether. Okay, so the plan for today, sir, as we already know, we'll be asking you questions, and I think you'll be able to like give us like a brief answer on all of them. So let's get started with the first one.
All right.
Yeah. So I think the first question, I think just wanted to like introduce the audience to everything. So how did you get started in this field, and what were you previously involved in IBM before the whole trend of cloud started?
Okay. So my association, I think you already said, my association with IBM goes almost 22 years back, right? I was fresh out of college, and IBM was one of the companies which were pioneer in the technology. So it obviously attracted me. So I joined back in 2000, and my job was to work on new products, new developments, and support the customers on the products, right? But then at the same time, I was also interested to see the depth of the kind of breadth and depth we had available in IBM. For example, IBM has research lab, IBM had software development, consulting business, and infrastructure, the hardware part, right? So the opportunities were limitless, and that's where I got more interested and motivated to explore, and hence I continue to move between different organizations within IBM to take that experience. But if you ask me about cloud, right? So cloud is not really new. I know the cloud has become the thing in the last few years, but I'm sure as far as your memory goes, you have been a consumer of cloud. Take an example of emails, right? We have all been using emails. It's a cloud offering. But if I take a practical example of how I learned cloud in the beginning was, we all have machines, right? Our machines are used when you're working on it, but it's just remains unused for probably half of the day. Okay, when we were working in IBM, there was a concept of connecting these machines together to use this power for some innovative or noble projects for which we didn't have a dedicated infrastructure. So they created this whole internal cloud without calling it cloud, where we could leave our machines on network on while we are not working. They will use they will consume the power of these machines, and that's where I got the first flavor of how my machine, being just one standalone laptop or desktop, could be actually connected to worldwide power and really help running on those projects. Again, it didn't strike me that was a cloud concept, just to be fair to my experience. But yeah, over the period when I started working with the customer more and more often, that's where I got to know that how this cloud is evolving by letting them host applications without worrying about where, how, all 9 yards of hosting an application and expedite things. So, it's a pretty long journey, and I'm sure we'll touch upon it in the next set of
Yeah, I
things.
think 100%. I think we'll like get into it in pretty
Yeah.
like briefly. I think my follow up question to this, you did mention like you have like there's been a hype of cloud recently, right? Even though it's been there for quite a bit of time. So I think it's pretty like straightforward. Like, why do you think it's been such a hype around cloud lately, and how do you think cloud is like helping organizations? So,
Right. So the interesting part is, for last 6 7 years, we have seen a humongous growth of cloud adoption, right? And the majority of the reason for that is the whole aspect of managing your own infrastructure, your resources, is becoming more and more cumbersome for the companies, right? Think about it. If you are using the power in your house, like electricity, you take it for granted. You know that there is electricity power coming in, you just use it, but you don't know the way power is generated, the whole powerhouses are maintained. If tomorrow I ask you, would you want to own a powerhouse so that you can power your own house, your straight away answer
so,
would be no, right?
yeah.
So that's how it used to be earlier, where companies used to own data centers, have hundreds of resources just managing those servers and ACs and electric wiring, which was becoming unmanageable. And then with increase in availability of bandwidth and connectivity, there was this concept slowly started picking up, that why do I worry? Why don't I worry and focus on my own business, which I am primarily focusing on? If my business is to sell products online, that's what I want to, not the whole infrastructure part. So
Yeah.
that's where cloud started picking up. Okay. Now, hype, when you talk about hype and how is it helping, it's really helping the companies. Think about cases like Uber, right? What is Uber? Uber is just a company with no cars, no
Yeah.
drivers, correct? But what did Uber do? Uber just used the cloud technologies like APIs and some services by connecting people together, right?
Yeah.
And experimented with an idea. And they did not launch with so many services in so many countries, just launched an idea probably in a pilot phase in a small town of a country, right? And then they experimented, they experienced, it gave a good return, they started expanding. If a company has to start now, they can actually use this cloud to start small, experiment, and then learn and grow, instead of first worrying about the whole data center being set up, infrastructure. So that's why cloud is really fueling the innovation, is fueling the entrepreneurship. Let's take some good benefits of how cloud is happening. So earlier, in my earlier career as well, there were customers who were owning the hardware. They will buy mainframes, they will buy PC servers, main other servers, and then after 6 or 8 years, the server will become almost
Obviously.
yeah, obsolete. Now they have to throw it, buy new. So the whole cycle. Now they just go to cloud, take whatever server they have to use it for a year, move to some other one. They don't need to worry. Blockchain. You talked about blockchain, right?
Yeah.
If you have to use a blockchain, how would you do? Can you really set up 20 or 50 servers in your house to experiment
No.
with blockchain? You can't. Go to the cloud, try it, works it? No, fine, move on, right? Or if it works, scale it out. So these are the advantages that cloud is bringing, which is basically attracting more and more customers.
Yeah. I think, like you mentioned, it makes the accessibility easier for I think these customers. So,
Correct.
okay, I think we can move on to our third question now. What are the types of cloud adoptions? I think a couple of like examples that were given to me were SaaS and PaaS. So,
Yeah.
and like about these cloud adoptions, when and where are they exactly useful?
Okay, so the three most popular models are IaaS, which is infrastructure as a service, The next one is PaaS, the platform as a service, and the finally SaaS, which is a software as a service. So let me take in a day-to-day life example of a pizza, right?
Okay.
So we all like pizza.
Yep.
How do you like the pizza, right? So if you have to buy all the ingredients, including from the flour and the oil and the yeast and everything, bring home, have an oven in your house which is electrically powered and chimney and everything, that's an example of IaaS, which means you own from top to bottom. You make the pizza, you clean it up, you throw the whole garbage and everything. That's your responsibility.
Yeah.
So that used to be IaaS model, where you need everything from top to bottom. Then you move to the next level, which is you go to let's say call it community kitchen. Okay, you have everything available. You just need to go and make the pizza yourself because you want to make it in a way that only you like the taste. You don't like the taste of others. You want to make it yourself.
Yeah.
Just go there, use the dough, use everything, shelf well, and make it, eat it, come back. You don't need to clean, you don't need to own. You pay for the oven for an hour that you use for, instead of
Yeah.
owning an oven, probably not using for the entire year, right? So
Yeah.
that's called platform as a service, where you got the platform, you build on top of what you need on top of it. And
Yeah.
finally, is SaaS. Pizza Huts, Domino's. They are the examples of SaaS. You
Yeah.
go, order what you want, eat it, come back. You don't need to worry about anything at all, right?
Yeah.
So these three models are provide you different flexibilities and different constraints. So
Okay.
infrastructure as a service, for example, give you the most flexibility that you got the hardware, you want any OS, multiple type of application servers, stacks, networking, whatever you want, you can do it, but more effort.
Yep.
PaaS takes away all these efforts, give you, let's say, an application server where you deploy only the application. You don't know how networking works internally. You don't know how these storages are connected. No worries.
Okay.
Less time to develop, less effort to develop, but less control also,
Yeah.
because the way it has been built is what you have to use, right? And SaaS is where you just go and log in and start using without even configuring anything, like your email clients, right? They don't give you any freedom. The only freedom you probably have is browser or your phone emails client. That's it. So
Yeah.
depending on the scenario, you use different type of cloud models.
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, like you at every stage you're like giving up flexibility versus like ease of use. So I think
Absolutely,
again depends on those companies really.
absolutely.
So I think you spoke quite a big deal about service oriented architecture, right? So I think my follow up question to this would be, how does service oriented architecture like compare to microservices, and what's the differences between the two?
Okay, this is a very interesting question, and not from just from you, Aditya, or from the students, but also from a lot of our customers, right? So service-oriented architecture has lived for last 20 years or so, right? We have seen it being used, organizations building a lot of applications around service-oriented. The whole point of service-oriented architecture was at enterprise level, at a big, large organization level, where there's nothing isolated, that one department doesn't work in on its own, one application doesn't work on its own. They always integrate with each other. They always talk to each other. So the concept of SOA was to make sure that irrespective of how one application is built or where it is deployed or which technology, they can talk to the others in a seamless manner, in a service oriented manner, right? So
Okay.
that's why SOA was born and kind of evolved, and it continues to evolve, by the way. Today it has not died because of microservice.
Yeah.
While microservice came up to help the organizations, developers, or the business to break down a big application, we used to call it monolith, break
Okay.
down into smaller pieces for the ease of development, ease of deployment, ease of maintainability. So think about an application that you have which has, uh, let's say 20 different functionalities, right? That's called
Okay.
one monolith application. Tomorrow
Yeah.
you make change in one application functionality. When you have to deploy, you have to test others also to make sure that you have not broken down anything during this process,
Okay.
because it's a big piece, right? You move the
Yeah.
whole piece together. So
Yep.
deployment takes longer, testing takes longer, impact assessment takes longer. While microservice said, let's make it only as large as one functionality needs to do. So
Oh,
if I want to change it tomorrow, I just replace this piece, bring a new piece, and rest everything anyway works together independently. So that's how microservices came into prominence and becoming more and more popular, because now I can move faster. I only need to focus on one item at a time, just keep moving instead of making 20 other things to move along with me, right?
Okay.
So that's how these things, by the way, they supplement each other. They do not complement or compete with each other. Sorry, they do not compete with each other. They kind of supplement each other.
Okay. I think one like brief follow-up that I would have is like you mentioned, like flexibility in service-oriented architecture, right? How would that compare to like flexibility in microservices?
So flexibility in microservices, like I said, is that it is small, lightweight.
Okay.
Okay. Now let's take a case of you and me being developers in an organization. Both of us are, right. You
Hmm.
come with a very strong Java background. I come with a very strong C background, right? So my organization need to develop some functionality for my clients, and they look at both of us and say, "Oh, sorry, if I have to develop in Java, I only have Aditya. If I have to develop in C, I only have Amit."
Yeah.
Now, how do I develop? I need two developers. Do I hire? Probably not. So microservice decoupling now enables the organization to say, you know what, you develop functionality A of the application Aditya in Java. Let Amit develop application functionality B in C++, and they can run independently. Okay.
Hmm.
So this kind of freedom also came in handy for the organizations. So
Yeah, I
that's
think
why, yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
it'll really work in their favor, right? Because they'll have like a significant amount of flexibility. I think that's
Absolutely
what most companies are looking for at this point.
correct.
So I think a follow-up question on microservices especially would be what role does a microservice play in adopting cloud?
Yeah, so it's actually microservices is kind of fueling the adoption of cloud. And
Okay.
one of the key reason is the cloud, one of the advantage that people see with the cloud is the flexibility. So
Yeah.
what is the first perspective people have about cloud? If I have cloud, which means I can do whatever I want, I can do whenever I want, start small, test it, close it. I don't need to really worry about long-term things, right? Same with microservices. A microservice brings that level of flexibility, and hence the kind of services that cloud offered, which were very necessary for microservices to function. Things like the containerized architecture, for example,
Yeah.
right? The container runtime. What does microservice need? A very small footprint, small lightweight software, because it is not big application. It's small. It's supposed to be fast, efficient. Okay, so cloud provides that kind of infrastructure. Cloud provides us DevOps kind of capability. DevOps means the whole automation of process, starting from the requirements, designing, testing, deployment, and continuous monitoring. So the whole DevOps enabled the microservices development on top of cloud. So people started liking and using more and more cloud for developing microservices.
Okay. I think you mentioned containerized architecture, right? I think that's where like the sixth question is around. I think that's the main part of it that I got. I think what we were like going for, in, especially with containerized architecture, the question that we framed is, what are your views on containerized architecture, and in general with this new buzzword, like the buzzwords like Docker and Kubernetes, like
Yeah.
what are your views around this? So, yeah.
All right. So I'm sure you do the software development, right? So when you do the development on your machine, right, you know that you need a Java runtime, you need some kind of libraries, or maybe Python, whatever you use. Then you need to have some kind of database libraries to connect to database. Then you need to have probably some other libraries, right? And then you build your application, you test application, and you feel like, yeah, it's working well. Now let me show it to my faculty, now let me show it to my professors or wherever. You take it, deploy somewhere else. Now you need to worry about 20 things to be there on that particular server, so that your application runs well. Something or else, something will break, and then you will start figuring out what happened. Oh, I forgot to have the Java version 9 because the version on the server is Java version 8. Okay, it's because some other application is running with Java version 8. Now you cannot upgrade to 9, otherwise that will break, right?
Yeah.
Or you need a JDBC driver for, let's say, Oracle specific version, which is not compatible with the other one on the same server. So these kind of issues used to happen. What container did was, container said, let me wrap everything what you need in one single unit called a container. Okay,
Yeah.
Everything that you need will be within that. There is nothing beyond it, there is nothing outside it. And hence, I will take this, shift it anywhere where a container engine like Docker runs, and that's
Okay.
it. It will for sure work. So that reliability, that independence came because of container, and hence it's becoming more and more popular.
Okay.
With so many developers around the world, everybody working in their own way, we don't need to worry because we all work in our own containers. So
Okay.
that's
That's
how it
great.
was helpful.
So could you give some like use cases of containers? I think you mentioned like having different dependencies, but are there like more use cases than that?
Yeah. So cloud is another important use case. So think about cloud as where you pay as you go. Pay as you go means you're running an application. Your
Yeah.
application is used on an average traffic. Okay, you're paying for the average. Suddenly, towards end of the month, there is a huge rush. So, for example, maybe it's a sales application where people are now registering all the sales of the month because it's end of the month they have to register, right? So there'll be
Yeah.
hundreds of people using the application. So suddenly your application scales up. Scales up means it has to have 5 times the resources requirement, right?
Yeah.
Containers enable that kind of flexibility because the difference between Docker and Kubernetes. Let's try to understand that. You mentioned
Yeah.
Docker and Kubernetes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I did. Yeah.
Docker is just a container engine where any type of container can run on Docker. But in this scenario that I just said, towards the end of the month, somebody has to go and provision more copies of the same container so that it is ready for workload. While what
Okay.
Kubernetes does is called container orchestration engine. So it's like an agent sitting there observing the traffic and at runtime increasing or decreasing the number of containers or even the servers on which the containers will run so that you as an application owner or as an application user doesn't need to worry on when the demand comes. It might be at the midnight while you're sleeping. You don't need to worry. So that's how the containers started picking up popularity also because these things work. And another thing called polyglot. So polyglot means uh, different languages. Same Java
Okay.
and C example.
Yeah.
I create
Okay.
my engine, you create your engine, and we all deploy together on the same machine, running in
Yeah.
Java, running in C, but still happily living together.
Yeah. Just like coding languages working in harmony, I guess.
Exactly. Without knowing that there is some neighbor sitting next to it, which is completely from a different nationality called Java.
Agree. Yeah. Agree. I think I love how you mentioned like it's quite interesting that it almost sounds like it's dynamically allocating resources. Like Kubernetes is like according to like what's required. I think that's solves like you mentioned, right? It takes a lot of like the user. Like I don't have to like sit and do that at night. That's pretty cool. So I would like to like ask like how is this done before Docker and Kubernetes? Like you have been in this industry for what 22 years, right? So how do you do things before like Docker and Kubernetes came around?
So earlier, the situation was different. Before Kubernetes or these kind of platform independent technologies came up, we used to have our own applications. We had to predict what kind of workload may come in. Okay,
Okay.
so for example, if I'm developing an application, I had to go into detail of understanding, okay, this application on an average will have 5 users, but on a weekend it will have 10 users, and hence my deployment, my network, my resources should be ready for those situations, all those sitting idle for rest of the time. It's like a banking cashier counter, right? So just because on a Friday, just before the closure of the bank on Saturday, 20 people come at the cashier, so you keep 5 counters. While on the rest of the day, only 2 counters are occupied, 3 counters are just sitting idle because they cannot do anything, right?
Yeah.
So it's a wastage.
Yeah.
So
I
we
think that's
used
like pretty
to
cool.
we used to have yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how we used to manage earlier, and more more closing observation also. If I notice that something increased this month, I'll make sure that I add capacity next month so that I don't need to fail or. So those kind of issues used to come earlier.
I think like for again, but for you it was like simply just open a container. Like for at that time it was like, oh, this counter now needs to be required. Like you just it's no longer closed. Like you just take the sign off. I guess it probably wasn't as simple, but with your example, it just sounded that simple.
True, true.
Okay, so I think we spoke quite in detail about microservices and also about containers, right? So I think the question would be around like, how do you think these two are connected? I think we've spoken a little bit about how they're connected, but could you like elaborate on that?
Right. So just reviving the definition of microservice: a small, manageable unit just doing one thing at a time, right?
Yeah.
And which can move independently of each other,
Okay.
right? So we talked about how container really enabled it. So container made sure that it's, first of all, it remains lightweight because container itself is a lightweight software. It doesn't know anything about the application, to be honest, right? It doesn't know. It just knows that there is a tenant sitting inside who has these requirements, which are all bundled within the container, right?
Yeah.
And it only exposes one endpoint for others to communicate to this application.
Yeah.
For example, an API or HTTP URL or something, right? That's all it knows. And it knows that the features of these applications are the I need two such containers for the week, but on a Saturday and a Sunday, I need five instances of these containers. So this is
Okay.
all it needs because I know the workload will increase. So I want to proactively plan. So this is how containers and microservices worked in a decoupled way, which means microservice doesn't know there is a container, the container doesn't know there is a microservice, but still they have a contract in place, some kind of managed bounding, you know,
Yeah.
that that they work together.
Okay. I think that like very much answers my question on that. It's kind of cool, like how these two platforms like work together at the end of the day, and like the contract thing. Perfect example. I was quite that clearly explained the thing. So I think my next question. Let's move away from. I think we've talked about microservices and containers for quite a bit. Let's talk about how agility is achieved through cloud. I think it's a little bit of a jump, but yeah,
Yeah. So that actually, by the way, that's cloud adoption. Agility is one of the biggest use case that the customers have. And why? So think about the example that I gave earlier. If I have to try blockchain today, okay, without cloud, what would I do? First of all, I'll make a business case. I'll say, you know what, for running a blockchain, I would require 50 servers. I would require these kind of servers, these kind of people. Then I would require, once the server arrives, it would take me 2 months to set up the blockchain fabric and the other necessary software, train the people, and make sure that it is working. And then I can start developing application. Oh, sorry, the use case didn't work. Let's now sell back the servers and software. Sorry, you have purchased this for a long time now.
yeah,
What to do, right?
yeah,
What is agility? Agility is I want to move fast, and if I have to change something on the way, I can change fast. And
okay,
in our world, we also call it fail fast. Okay, so
okay,
cloud said you don't need to worry about all those things. You come to me, ask for a service, whether it's a blockchain or anything else. You come and ask for a service. You try that service, pay for what you tried, and then if you don't like, just decouple and move on, and you don't need to pay. So it enabled me to try, innovate. We call it innovation use case.
okay,
And secondly, it also gave me a flexibility to choose what kind of hardware I need. For example, banks, airlines, they are really, really heavy on some very specific hardware, like power systems, mainframes.
yeah,
Okay, if they require some type of specific hardware for a month, for 2 months, where would they get it? So the cloud will give them that kind of agility.
yeah. Okay. I think we'll have another. I think we have a question from the audience actually.
Mhm.
Uh, do you? It's a little. I don't. I'm not sure if it's like related directly to the previous one, but it's a little different. So, I think. Do you see the industry? I know cloud is like all the hype right now, but do you see the industry moving away from cloud to some other form of service in the future? And will there be any tangible alternative to cloud computing?
Okay, that's a very thoughtful question from from the audience.
Yeah.
So first of all, moving away from cloud, the answer is no, not yet. They are still there. By the way, you'll be surprised that cloud being so popular and easily available, there are still so many organizations who have either not moved to cloud or who have moved very limited to the cloud. They are not using the true potential of a cloud yet.
Okay.
So it is still few years away by the time the true adoption of cloud happens and the stagnation comes in to say, you know what, I have I have exploded enough. Now what? What do I do? Right? So yeah, it's still a few years away. Um, Now the second part of the question is what is the tangent, right? What will be the tangible alternative to cloud computing, right?
Yeah,
Now
that's the second one. Yeah.
this is a kind of loaded question, I would say. Loaded in the sense, when we talk about what is the alternative, alternative from what sense? Alternative from hosting the infrastructure, then probably it's too early to predict what could come, because we may call it differently, but eventually it will be somebody hosting for you. You don't need to worry. Like I gave you an example of power
Yeah, you
delivery, right?
don't need to
Somebody,
make your own power.
correct. It becomes commodity. So the whole processing becomes commodity.
Yeah.
But if we talk about technology, we talk about skills. Actually, that's the next level of cloud adoption is taking. For example, we have talked about infrastructure, we have talked about software, but now
Yes.
people are also becoming cloud commodity, which means I need a developer for 1 week with Java skills and Python skills. I don't know who. I just drop my request to cloud community. I get my output. It's like a cloud service to me. So that's the next level of cloud impacting other parts of the industry.
Okay. I think that way again, like I think it just stresses on the flexibility, right? You just need a
Yes.
developer, you ask for a developer, you get that one.
Yes. Because you are focused on what you want to achieve rather
You
than
yeah,
how.
there's a single goal. Yeah. I think let's move back to like the questions that we had prepared. I think I hope to the audience, like I hope that answered your like questions. Was a pretty like it was actually like you mentioned, that was a pretty loaded question. So so I think my next question would be: is public cloud the way to go into the future? Again,
Yeah,
very
so
loaded.
that's let me take a step back before I go into the answers of this question. I think there's an important concept to be understand. There are multiple type of clouds in the market. Public cloud obviously is the most common, most popular, easily accessible, and known to everyone, like AWS, Azure, IBM, Google, right? They are all public cloud options available. But then not everybody can work on public cloud. There are a lot of thinking that goes behind while when you choose a cloud. Not just who provides that cloud, but can I go to the cloud is also a big decision in an organization. And why? Think about uh, some regulatory industries, for example, telecom. Okay, the telecom regulatory requirements mandate that you need to host all your data within the country. So
Yeah,
if a telco operator wants to try a public cloud, but if that public cloud is not in the country, it cannot do that,
agreed.
right?
Yeah,
Because it's in Switzerland, it's in Germany, or wherever it is. You cannot try that because it's not in your country.
yeah, the
Or
regulations. Yeah,
government, so government entities or banks or a lot of these militaries, so they cannot really adopt public cloud so easily for all the requirements. Maybe they will try developing, but they will not move the data, right?
okay,
Then comes the concept of a private cloud. So private cloud means I want the cloud kind of freedom, but I want it in a private, my own environment within the country. So that's public becomes a private, but it has limitations. And
okay,
then there is a so this is how you need to see that uh, a public cloud, first of all, is not the only cloud, and secondly, the public cloud is not the only way to go forward. You have to think about, so there are other benefits also, by the way, when you continue on your own infrastructure. So things like, if you want to try small, yeah, cloud is probably hands down winner, right?
yeah,
But if you have a very large footprint, over a period of time, when we do the TCO analysis, total cost of ownership analysis, your own infrastructure turns out much more positive than moving to public cloud, because that will turn out more expensive for you,
okay,
right? So depending on the type of workload or type of scenarios, you may go public, you may not go public. So you need to
okay.
remember that there are options.
Yeah, like, again, it'll really depend on what the particular needs of that company is, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
I think stressing more on like the potential of cloud, I think we have a question from one of our audience members. So according to you, what is the true potential of cloud?
What is the
Like,
true potential of the cloud?
yeah, I think they mean like where can it go in the future? I think it sounds a little vague, but I think they probably mean where it can it go in the future.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, 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 I think it's a pretty fair question. So when you say what is the true potential of the cloud, or where can it take us to the future? So the way I'm seeing the trend in adopting the cloud is people are more worried now. How do I adopt the cloud at the moment because of the security or data regulation, the one that I just told you. But then in the next 4 to 5 years, the trend that we are seeing as compared to the last 5 years, for example, it's becoming more and more under the carpet thing, which means it's there. We don't know where, we don't know how it works, but we just need to leverage the resources. We just need to use what is available and do more and more innovation and what is it called? Achieve our business objectives rather than worrying about things. So, from a true potential point of view, it's again. Subjective. If you ask people from different industries, the potential will be different. Okay, so if you ask me as a, let's say, as a banker, for me the true potential is if I'm a global bank like Citibank or HSBC, cloud gives me the flexibility to be next to my customer. My customer could be in Germany, my customer could be in India, my customer could be in US. Same service available everywhere, so the cloud gives me that freedom. For me, it's the use cases are endless, but for some other type of industries, the use cases may be very limited. So we still yet to see, uh, how this industry changes.
Okay. I think like carrying on top of this, like we've talked a lot about like how cloud, like what are the potentials of cloud, what how like the advantages of having like breaking things down. But I think the question I would personally have was when would cloud not be a perfect fit? And I know you've mentioned that maybe for a regulatory body, like having public cloud might not be a perfect fit, but what about cloud as in general? So,
Yeah. So apart from what has already been said, so things about, for example, if I have multiple applications working together, and if I want to move certain applications to cloud, if those applications are so tightly coupled with each other that they are aware of each other, they are aware of how they work together, it's very difficult for me to break it down, move some parts to cloud and keep something inside. So those scenarios, it's very difficult to move to cloud. Second example is biggest challenge that we face is security.
okay.
So security means certain type of requirements are I need to have full 100% control of how things are established, how things are deployed, how things are managed, monitored, and controlled. Unless I have 100% control, I am not comfortable to move that workload. Things like government data, things like security agencies data, right?
Yeah.
So cloud does not give you that level of freedom. Cloud expects certain abstraction of how security is in place at the cloud, and hence you have to just work on certain layers of security. You cannot work on all layers of security, and those use cases, sorry, I cannot move to cloud. and
Yeah.
and then there's a third application which we said that uh, the data and application needs to be within your country or within your premise, which you cannot let
Mhm.
go. So I'll not repeat.
Yeah, that again, that's up to regulation, right? So
Yeah.
I think one more question that we had, like you mentioned, security on cloud, right? So, what are the security features that you can use to protect data, and especially protect data against things like DOS attacks? So,
Yeah, that's a positive side of it, right? So which means I said that you may not have all security control, but you also have some acceleration in security through cloud, because most of the cloud providers certify themselves on highest level of security standards, right? Because you are taking a risk of moving a workload, so they provide you all those security measures, which means whether data in motion has to be secured, encrypted, data at rest has to be secured and encrypted. If
yeah,
they provide you out of the box capabilities of auditing, which means if somebody is accessing your data within the cloud, they give you every single report of who accessed, what time, which row or which particular column of the data was accessed, that level of detail. They come out of the box instead of you implementing some software solutions. I'm sure you're familiar with key management, for example, right? So key
yeah,
management means the cloud offers you, many of the cloud offers you bring your own key. So that means
okay,
you can run your workload on my cloud. If I'm the cloud provider, bring your workload. You don't need to necessarily use the key that I provide, because you will always have a suspicion. What if Amit loses the key or shares the key with someone, or somebody attacks Amit's data, and take out my key? You don't need to
yeah,
worry. You can bring your own key, and I will support that kind of flexibility. So these
Yeah.
are out of the box security capabilities that cloud provides you. Otherwise, for which you need to use to implement a lot of big solutions, which now you don't need to.
Okay. I think now, like, I think this is like something I wanted to ask you as well. What skills do you think are important to join this bandwagon of cloud? And also, what skills that you like personally think are like more important than others? Like, I think everyone has a general idea, but
Yeah.
what's your like personal take on this?
So the way I saw a change in skills aspect since become more and more adoption of the clouds earlier. I'll tell you before cloud, and then I would be able to contrast my answer, right? So before the cloud, I was more focused on application skills, like I said, Java or ESB services skills, integration skills, right? I did not worry how the servers work or how the network work or how the database installation and management works. That was not my part of the job. There was somebody else doing it. But
Yeah.
with more and more cloud becoming popular, I have seen that now it is easier and also expected for you to have a full stack view of the things. So when you work on a cloud, you also have not just have freedom, but you also have responsibility to understand when you develop an application in Java, you run on a Docker, you use DevOps tool chains to deploy your Docker on a Kubernetes, which is running on a network. Okay, and that network has some kind of security firewalls in place, which you, Aditya, alone can configure just from the console. So that
Okay.
means the expectation as well as the exposure of what all goes into full stack application development has increased. Now, that doesn't mean that now all of us have to have the same set of skills. No, we still will specialize.
Of course.
So the roles that I'm seeing more and more popular are cloud platform architects. So the
Okay.
cloud platform architects are the one who understand how to design and set up a cloud for an organization, security in place, monitoring in place. How do you control the cost of the cloud so that not everybody start coming and start deploying applications without worrying about the cost because it's freely available, right? So cloud platform architect. There is another role which is very, very popular nowadays. It's called site reliability engineer. It's called SRE, Site Reliability Engineer.
Okay.
It's very interesting. So there was a legacy version of the role in the past, but now this role allows the companies to adopt the cloud, monitor it in a way that the adoption of cloud happens very seamlessly. All the development, operations, business team work together, understand the benefit of cloud, as well as make sure that whatever issues are happening are immediately fixed and they improve their maturity. So SRE roles are very high in demand for the next 2 to 3 years at least, right? And then of course we have full stack developers, we have security engineers, we have
Okay.
data scientists and designers, and of course the hyperscaler specific architects like Azure architect, AWS
Okay.
architect, IBM cloud architects. These are very good roles now,
Okay.
high
That's
demand.
sounds like a entire like industry just within cloud. Like that was I didn't expect there to be so many of them. Like
Oh
personally,
yeah,
I'm not the most like I don't have the biggest knowledge about cloud, but I think this like really shows that there's so much potential there. I was quite like interested in like the SRE role you mentioned. Like it involves like working around a lot of domains. Pretty interesting.
it
I
is.
think we're almost at like the end of our time. Like we've almost reached the end of the time, but we have one question from the audience, and I think
Mhm.
this is the question that we kind of expected. What do you think is the future of gaming in cloud, especially considering the new hype of metaverse by Facebook? Facebook like kind of like really like brought this topic into the like front pages, right? Because of the whole metaverse hype. What is your take on this?
Right. So I should have expected this question. Gaming, right, is one of the most popular thing
College
among not
kids.
just youth, but yeah, but I'm seeing this not just youth, by the way, right? It's even among the millennials or other gens as well. So gaming is taking interesting turn. So earlier, what was the earlier model of gaming? You have an Xbox or PS4 at your home. You buy the game, you set it up in your server, and tomorrow, if Xbox launches a new model, you throw the previous one after a few years, bring the new one, start using it, right? But how is cloud helping that industry? So you must be aware of the recent shortage of silicons and shortage of GPU in the market, right? In the last one or
Yeah.
2 years, and that really impacted some of the high-end laptops, right? Because GPU was not easily available, so the supply of those hardware, the high-end laptops, which are very good gaming laptops, were not available in the market. So
Yeah.
cascade impact. But then at the same time, the cloud is enabling such scenario where I, as a user, have a very basic machine which I use for my work. But if I want to play, instead of investing so much, I go to clouds like the Google clouds, right?
Yeah.
Or even
Google.
Apple. Now Apple has also launched their gaming clouds, Google Stadia or Microsoft X Cloud. These clouds
Yeah.
where most of the heavy lifting happens on the cloud, only the rendering happens on my machine, right? Instead of my machine having doing all the heavy lifting part.
Yeah.
So this is how now cloud is enabling. Of course, it comes with the limitation that there is a latency. So the people
Yeah.
who are very, very focused on sharpshooting and very accurate, targeting, those kind of things, they will have some issues. But I'm sure this will also improve in the market, because now these cloud providers are setting up their servers almost in every single region, every single country, so that this latency reduces and you have a better user experience.
Yeah, I think even from this perspective, if you look at it, it's just increasing accessibility, right? Everyone has access to like such high like power computing systems just by with using like a basic laptop. I can use like a basic
Exactly.
notebook and access like
And
really
now
like
I
power.
don't need to buy those Forza, or I don't need to buy those games, expensive games, just for me, right? I
Yeah,
pay $1, play probably a once or twice, and then I don't need to pay a subscription next month. I
yeah.
go to a new game,
It'll just
right?
change the industry, right? At the end of the
Exactly.
day, like the whole like you buy your own game, you buy everything will completely change if cloud can fix latency. That's the one part.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah. I think that's all the questions that I had, and I think that's all the questions even the audience had. I think everyone's kind of very happy with. But if you go to the chat, everyone's pretty happy with how like the session was going. I hope
That's my
everyone.
pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you a lot, sir. Like you gave us a very like detailed like you gave a lot of information about just how cloud works. And I personally had like not a lot of idea about what Docker and Kubernetes was, and I'm leaving this session like personally knowing a lot of these concepts will help me definitely in college, and I'm sure it'll help our audience as well.
I'm glad
Yeah,
that it was a good one. For me personally, also it was. I also learned a lot of new, insightful questions that are coming from the audience, which
yeah,
now I will take back as a homework and do a little bit more thinking about it. So thanks for this opportunity, Aditya. I think it's a great platform. I know I can't see the audience, but I hope they can hear me. That I really want to thank them for being
yeah.
there
I
for
think
me. Wow,
I think they would thank you as well because they seem to be quite happy.
my pleasure.
Very fun session. Yes, I think that'll be it from our side. Thank you to everyone for
All right.
tuning into the first session of Essentials. And yeah, see you at the next one. Stay tuned and follow our social media handles for future updates. Thank you so much, sir.